Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Daddy eats lots. Munch, munch, munch.
Hello and welcome to Daddy Eats Last, where we discuss the challenges of being a man in modern society and whatever the hell that phrase even means. I'm Kane, and joining me today, as always, to chat man stuff are Ryan and Maddie. Firstly, gents, how's the weekend?
Yeah, good one, mate. I had my brother over, who's a little bit younger than me and can be a little bit wild. So we got in at 4:30 on Saturday morning, and I don't think TK was too impressed because the next day I don't know that we got out of bed. But yeah, it was good to see him over from Perth before he heads over to live in Canada for a little while. So yeah, catch up with him and had a good weekend, but hurting a little. I don't know that I really remember it too much, but I do remember the cab driver trying to fleece me. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in the city, just need to go to South Bank. And he was like, yeah, all right, wouldn't put the meter on, $20 cash. And I was like, no way, it's like $10 South Bank. So I was like, well, this is why everyone likes Uber. And was about to get out, and then he put the meter on and drove. So
I was going to say it's 2018. You should have been Ubering, shouldn't you?
I should have, but I literally walked out and it was right there. So I think there was just pure laziness that got in the way.
Fair enough too. Matthew, what about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good weekend this one. We had the wife's sister who was over from the UK, so she went back home this weekend. So we just did a few little family things with her before she left, just a bit of stuff around the house as well. It was pretty average weather this weekend, unfortunately, but yeah, pretty cruisy weekend. Just pretty light on.
We were much the same, to be honest, in that it was just one of those sort of standard weekends where we got a few bits and pieces done, did a few bits and pieces with the kid as well, but you never complain when you have a sort of quiet one with a kid. What I did want to chat about tonight is not weekend, it's more about work and really around work-life balance, if that's a phrase we want to use, around working part-time and full-time, especially mixing it with kids and being able to work remotely and stuff these days. Obviously, with technology increasing over the last 5 to 10 years, it does enable a lot of people to work remotely, be it part-time or full-time. And also with different roles changing, actually being able to adopt a part-time role as a mum or a dad and still being able to co-parent your kid. There is flexibility or some flexibility in a lot of roles, understanding that it doesn't apply to all roles, but flexibility around how that looks like going forward as well. So I might start by asking, what's your work situation at the moment around, I guess, work-life balance, part-time, full-time, working remotely and the like?
I've currently got the role as the part-time dad in our family. So that started from the 1st of July, since we had the little fella. So he was born in June. Then Kimmy had basically the month off. Then from the 1st of July, we sort of worked it. So I would work 3 days a week. And 2 days a week, I'd take the little guy. And then just this week, we've sort of flipped it around. So I'm going from 3 days working down to 2 days working, and I'll take the little guy for 3 days a week. So that's because the wife works from home, and she's got a position where she sort of just can't take 6 months off to spend with the little guy. So yeah, part-time dad for me. I'm lucky enough that the job I have allows for that, and I've got quite a really good boss who was on board from the start. So even before we had the little guy, I sort of just had a chat to the boss and said, look, this is what we're thinking of doing. Is there any capacity within the role that I could sort of, do the bit of a part-time dad role? And yeah, straight away she's jumped on board that and said, yep, let's try and work it out. And we've come to a nice little arrangement. So yeah, it's going okay.
How have you found that mixing, I guess, work and then non-work, looking after a really young baby to begin with as well? Like, how do you find that mix of switching on and switching off between the work hat and the dad hat?
Yeah, I found it quite difficult, to be honest, at the start. So going from, 5 days working out of the house, it's a completely different environment to being inside the house. And, I'll just stay right now, just take my hat off to all, full-time mums. Like, I don't know how they do it. It's an absolute amazing what they do, especially with, 2, 3, even 4 kids. It's just, a feat of, brilliance. But it was quite hard at first because, as I said, you're going from 5 days down to, 3 days work. You've still got work in the back of your mind. And on those 2 days of looking after the little guy, it was sort of a lot of sitting around the house. You really can't go out anywhere until he's in a routine, he's sleeping. And I was sort of sitting there feeling a bit not useless, but non-productive, as in, there's so much to be done around the house that I want to be doing, but you're sort of looking after or raising a child, which you sort of forget about. Not that you forget about the child's there, but you just forget that that's your role. Like that's what you're there to do, is just purely raise that child. But as time's gone on, and we're into month 4 now, so I've sort of got a bit more of a grasp on things. He's sleeping better, and yes, the things are going a lot better now than what they were. But yeah, completely different. But in terms of switching off, Kane, I don't really do that much because I do enjoy of a night, not enjoy, but well, I do enjoy actually. Yeah, jumping on the computer, when the girls are gone to bed or the little fella's in bed, and just jumping in, checking in, like into work, remote logging in, like you said, a lot of people doing these days, and just punching out a couple of little tasks here and there, just to maybe, for fulfillment more than anything, that you've sort of, achieved something for the day, other than just sort of raising a little guy, which again is super important, and a role within itself.
Yeah, well,
Were you full time with the two girls when they came?
I did with Mia. So when we first moved up to Brisbane, it took a while to get a job. So for a few months there, I was purely at home with Mia, looking after her as well while the better half worked. But with Eloise, no, there was really no time off there. There was just the standard 2 weeks when she was born, then straight back into sort of work. But there was a little bit of time off. There was a bit of conflicts and some sickness and stuff in the family. So there was a little bit of time off here and there, but nothing like what I'm having now with Sam. So
now that he's settled down with his sleep, would probably be a little bit better as well, because that sleep deprivation is the worst. And those parts of the day where they say sleep when baby sleeps, and there's some days, especially when they're quite young, you just have to, because that through the night where it's up every 2 or 3 hours, or sometimes you're having a bad night, even less than that, actually trying to sleep during the day even feels worse, like being at home and having a sleep when you could have been doing stuff, but you're that exhausted you need to sleep. It's even trying to manage that, it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, it is. I've been kind of lucky with Sam. He's fallen into a nice pattern early on, so sleep deprivation hasn't been too bad. And I don't know whether or not by the third you get so used to not sleeping anyway. I mean, the two girls, were always early risers, and like I haven't had a sleep in since like 2010. But it's just you're always on go. There's never really an off button or a relax button. But yeah, sleep deprivation, like especially with the other two, was the second one was the hardest, because just you're constantly on the go with, like we had Mia, who was 3 years old, versus you've got a brand new baby. That was hard to manage those two. But I think now with the third one, what is sleep? Yeah.
Now, Ryan, you're in a completely different situation at the moment, but how do you go with work roles? I know you do a lot of different things. Maybe it's worthwhile expanding on what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then any sort of flexibility you have around hours and ability to maybe work remotely and things like that.
So I probably am on the other end of the spectrum, as you say, in terms of burning the candle, that side of things. Previously had some physiotherapy clinics, which we sold earlier this year. And that's put me, since then, I've taken a business and operations manager role with Bupa to do a bit of corporate, I don't know, see what that sort of world's like. So I do that 4 days a week. It's only recent, but structuring that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because I've also got an academic position with Swinburne Uni. So I teach in their School of Physiotherapy, 1 day a week there. So we're building out a course there and doing some teaching stuff. So that's sort of my, I guess, Monday to Friday setup. But then there's another company, PHW Group, which is our national occupational physio company that we built, started that 5 years ago. Probably the last 12 months, I've been able to transition out of an operational role there into, I guess, more like a board of director role. And that job, that's got plenty of flexibility, which is handy. But usually I will find myself working Saturday mornings to just get on top of that stuff. And then I am on another board of directors as well, which is in the hospitality entertainment space. So there's a lot of, some weeks it's some very long hours, especially if we've got like a board event and then a PSW something and then some Saturday work. So it can really blend out. Fortunate in that both the role now that I have in the corporate space and also my teaching role, I had the businesses beforehand. So I was able to negotiate flexibility within those roles, and that has been good so far. Very much more outcomes based than hours, but sometimes it's a lot of work, sometimes it's not, but you can sort of blend it, like, because of the flexibility of today and because everything can be ran out of the cloud, I guess, you can sort of blend it into your life. And yeah, as long as I don't mind sort of working a little bit on a Sunday night, usually with a glass of red or something, and Saturday morning in a nice cafe, it seems to be pretty manageable at the moment. That being said, I have no idea how a kid's going to fit in there yet, but we'll work that one out down the line.
It's funny how that works, actually, because I can say you obviously a little bit younger than my good self or my bad self. And when I was your age, I was much the same. I was burning the candle at both ends and in a corporate accounting sort of role. And then outside of that, I was trying to build little businesses on the side, mainly because I didn't find accounting that interesting. So trying to find something outside of it would engage me. By just sheer luck, I've started a business sort of 3 or 4 years ago, and then our little fella came along around 2.5 years ago. So we had about a year's lead time to build the business before he came along, and it wasn't. He was obviously planned. He wasn't an accident or anything like that. But there wasn't
It's on
some sort
record.
of, yeah, it's on record. If you're listening down a few years' time, son, you were absolutely planned, and you'll always be loved. But the business wasn't planned to be built around having a child, but it's turned out really well. And my much better half works in the business as well. And we actually have a roster on the fridge of who actually looks after the little fella during the week. So there's morning shifts and afternoon shifts. So today, being Monday, I had him in the morning. I took him to see his 2 great grandmothers. Then we've come home and he's been put to bed by about 1 o'clock. And that means I could start work from 1, and I'll work through from 1 until 5 o'clock when he has dinner and we have to do our dinner prep. And then I'll jump back on the computer at 7. So it's just worked out this way. There was no big plan behind it. And I completely understand that everyone's situation is different. And we're really lucky. We worked really hard, but we're also really lucky to have flexibility to split time on him as well. But I worked out that in an accounting role, your productivity levels, you actually give away 20% of your time anyway to, admin and stuff like that, like crappy stuff. So if I take away that and just do raw productive work when I'm on the clock, I have a 25-hour work week of traditional work time. So if I really punch out and focus during those 25 hours, that's as much as I'd ever charge a client in a corporate role anyway. So our business is no worse off than if I was working 40 hours and then, mucking around for an hour and a half a day, talking around the water cooler or doing X or doing Y. So for us, it's worked really well. It wasn't planned, but it's turned out in a sort of fantastic way where we've got that work-life blend, but it seems to work for us at the moment.
No, I was just going to say, Ryan, have you and TK discussed the possibility when, if kids do eventuate, how you would manage both your roles? Because I understand you're both quite busy in the roles you guys do.
Yeah, it is a good question. So TK is doing very well. She works with Seek, sort of psychology background, and does some clinical work here and there on Saturdays as well. Actually, in the old clinic that I had, but we've had a chat about it. We're not too sure how it'll work either, because we also throw in the mix that neither of our parents are in the same state as us as well. So when we talk about it, we're talking about where do we live, what are we doing for work. Thankfully, a little bit like Kane. So I do have a business that, again, very fortunate. Worked quite hard to get it going, but it does run relatively, I guess, that I can fit around my lifestyle. So I could always drop into that. And that has, I think, just having that in the background and not being reliant on just one sort of stream of income probably made me a little bit pushier with negotiations and flexibility and that kind of thing. But I have no doubt when we have a kid, and knowing my partner, who I would have a kid tomorrow, she's got a 5-year time span. So we're kind of trying to meet somewhere in the middle. She is doing well in her career and certainly doesn't want that to stop. So I would probably also be looking at part-time daddy, and working out however that can work. At the moment, we don't know. I do throw out the thing that I'll just one day sell everything and just be a full-time dad, which would be amazing. But we'll sort of see what happens, I guess. But more and more increasingly, we're sort of having that discussion, and also just possibly doing things in terms of CV and setting things up and resume and all that kind of thing to be able to just flex in and out of work. So maybe take a year off here or 2 years off there, and then be able to jump back in without taking too much of a backward step. Luckily, again, like what Kane said, I've always got the option to go, because I've got the business there. I can jump back into that, but also just jump into sort of a 2-3 day a week physio role, or there's a lot of locum stuff in health. But I know that a lot of people don't have that flexibility. But for us, it would be really hard, because if we sort of look into the future, we're both on some pretty ambitious, I'd say, trajectories in where we could go if we stay on this path. So yeah, I actually don't know yet, but I'm very much keen on being probably a part-time dad, especially early on.
Yeah, if anyone out there listening has the opportunity to do it, and it's not possible for some people in some roles to be able to take on a part-time dad role. For all the guys out there, if you are having a kid and you have the opportunity, you should definitely take it up. Being home and being able to see your kid grow is amazing. Like, the time's invaluable. You cannot possibly put a value on the time that you get to spend, especially early on with the kid. The first year is really, really bloody hard. And then after that, it just progressively gets slightly better, different, but that interaction that you can have with your kid as they grow up is priceless. So if anyone out there is listening and has the opportunity, I highly recommend it, even though it does make your life a bit more complex for a while.
It's funny. One of the girls at work today was commenting about how she's got a little guy in grade 1, and her second one is starting prep next year. And she was saying that at the school drop-offs, how much different it's been over the last few years, how many more dads are appearing at drop-offs and pickups. So yeah, it's fantastic that so many more dads are getting this kind of opportunity, and and wanting to sort of take on this role as part-time care or part-time dad, as opposed to maybe the generation before us, which was obviously dominantly workforce male. It's good they're getting opportunity.
Well, that's a really good point that you make there as well. Like, for women to reach equality in the workforce, which we all want, there needs to be a change that guys adopt some of what has traditionally, in inverted commas, been a female role. So for gender equality, there needs to be that flexibility for people to do whatever their family wants them to do. And all of this is always a family agreement. Like Ryan and TK, you'll come together as a family and you'll discuss and agree on, this is what we want to do going forward as a family unit around who's doing what work. So they're always family decisions, and people have to respect the decision of the family. It's not generally one person telling the other person they can't do X and they can't do Y. It's always a family decision on what's best, what people think is best for their kid.
Like, it's a weird time to be around, I guess, in that 2018, and that it is very weird. Like, if we talk pushing for equality in the workplace, I think it would be amazing if dads can take a certain period of maternity leave, or I know some workplaces now allow dads to go, well, you can have, say, a month, but if you want to do the first 2 weeks off and then the next 2 weeks as part-time, or sort of stretch it out, so to give that extra time. And I think it's certainly happening slowly but surely. Even sort of talking to people around the corporate space and friends that I have with they're noticing a lot is changing in that space, which is good. Work from home and that, but I still think it's going to take probably another at least generation to really see the effects of it. Because whilst there is sort of a lot of workplaces are now work from home or flexible hours or that kind of thing, I was talking to a friend of mine who works in banking, and he's like, yep, it's great when we're renovating the house, or I have a day work from home and there's a tradesman or whatever, but he goes, but if I do it too much, it's certainly noted, and like we have all of it, but there's still a bit of that culture around going, if you're not seen in the office, or if you're leaving at 5 o'clock too many days, you sort of go a bit lower down on, I guess, the promotional rung is how he was saying it. So I think it's getting there, and it's slowly getting there, but it's definitely a weird time, and how do we actually move ourselves there? And even you guys have touched upon that. I imagine there's been some challenges, I guess, doing the part-time dad thing.
Not for me. I'm lucky in the fact that the director of my firm is a female. And I was thinking the other day about the firm I used to work at down in Melbourne, which was heavily dominated by male partners. And if I went and had the conversation that I had with my current boss with one of those male partners, I sometimes wonder how that would have gone. Obviously, the female director has kids of her own, and she's gone through, raising kids, daycare, putting them through school, etc. So she knows the pressures that are there on females to get this stuff done. Obviously, she knows my partner works as well, so that's I think one of the reasons she was so flexible and great to talk to about it. But again, having that conversation with a male partner, would I have got the same sort of reaction and cooperation? I'm not too sure I would have, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I think females on the whole have a much greater level of empathy to that situation, empathy in general. So you probably did get a different result given the ownership structure at where you work now. And I remember even trying to work from home at the accounting firm in Melbourne where I used to work. And I remember having a conversation with a partner. And, well, I want to work from home for a day. And they go, well, what do you mean? Well, I would like to do my work from home. They go, well, you just can't do that. You have to come into the office and do the work. I've gone, how about I guarantee you that I'll give you 100% productive hours, which is 7.5 hours of this particular day. Guarantee it. It's all chargeable. I guarantee you that I'll actually do more work at home than I do in the office. Okay, so it all came down to money for them. So it had nothing to do with what would be better for me, and it saved a certain amount of travel in and out. It purely came down to the dollars and cents. So again, this was that traditional sort of older sort of male demographic as opposed to any other sort of ownership structure. So I think some of it is to do with who your boss is, and yeah, certainly can see in your situation there, Matt, where having a female ownership structure would enable that more than a lot of traditional males.
It's interesting, and I think it's also about like what you do lends itself to a lot more flexibility in this space, but also, I mean, it's a bigger conversation now because we just look at, like, I mean, TK and I sort of look at it and go, well, if we want a house that has a backyard and these kind of things, just from a financial point of view, the realistic days of one of us working and the other, and we're both in great jobs and very fortunate to be in well-paid jobs and this kind of thing, but we still turn around and go, well, to buy a house and do all these kind of things, we probably will both have to be working in some way, which or form. But coming from a health background, I found, especially when I did more treating and sort of, I also think of roles such as doctors, nursing, and that whole health space, especially if you're in that service side of it. We, like when I had the physio clinics, you've got to be there to see a patient at the moment. I mean, hopefully technology improves and we do something cool, and telemedicine allows for a lot more of this flexibility. But I think it really helps with people having more and more jobs, and with technology coming in, that we can do more and more work from home. But there's still a lot of those jobs out there that, like, if you're a nurse, you're on shift work and you've got to do X hours. When I was physio full time, it was like, well, you are at the clinic, maybe you could leave an hour early and do your notes from home. But slowly technology will also play a part in allowing more and more jobs to become a lot more flexible. And we're seeing that with, you know, Kickstarter and Uber Eats and all these side jobs that a lot of people are doing, allowing the flexibility there. But I think it's still probably a long way before everybody can have that luxury, I guess.
Technology and empathy will, I think, drive a lot of this change. Technological change to allow people, and then empathy and trust that, you know, an employer trusts their employee to do the right thing at home. There's still a level of distrust when an employee wants to do something which is a little bit outside the box. So to, you know, continue down this path of good change. I love when I walk to a park and I see another guy there with a kid in the middle of the day. I think it's great. Like,
Bit by bit, we'll slowly get there with a bit of a movement, an uprising of part-time dads.
The setup you've got now with you and your partner, Kane, where you can both work from home, do you foresee that changing when the little guy goes off to school and he's out of the house for, you know, 6-7 hours a day, or will things remain the same for you guys, do you think?
firstly, I won't need to lock the study. I can take the lock off the study because he seems to walk in and want to pretend that he's doing some work by slapping on the computer, which is great and really cute, but also highly disruptive. When he goes to school, I certainly can foresee spending more time working on the business, where at the moment it is just trying to maintain what we've got. When he goes back to school, or when he goes to school, I should say, I should have the ability with a bit more time to actually expand the business if I want to. It'll just give me the choice. I can choose to maybe spend a bit more on the life stuff, or I might be able to expand the business. So yeah, that's a really good point. Once he goes to school and there's a bit more time, I think we'll both have the opportunity to spend that time how we want.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think the way that we're trying to look at it is not, you know, I'll work full time or TK will be home, or one or the other, or we might do part time or part time. We're sort of trying to look at it as there'll be various stages as our kids are different ages, as they grow up. Like obviously, you know, what you were saying, Matt, I can imagine when I have a kid for the first 6 months, I'm going to be pretty useless. So with various stages on where one of us can plug in, plug out, and hopefully get a bit more of that tag team thing going. Not saying it'll be easy by any means, but just trying not to look at it so black and white, going, okay, well, one of us has to do this and one of us should focus more on the other, and seeing if we can pull in, pull out. And then when they're at school, and especially when they're teenagers, you know, go back to working 60 to 80-hour weeks, because they're not going to want to see you anyway. And we'll have self-driving cars by then, so you won't have to taxi them around, so it'll be fine.
And that about wraps it up for this week. Thanks for listening, and we will be back next week for another episode, or should I say serving, of Daddy Eats Last. How's that for a dad joke? Catch you next week.
Bye bye. Bye bye.